I now have the pleasure to introduce you to an amazing leader, both for the state of Minnesota and for our nation. Since arriving in the Senate, Amy Klobuchar has earned a reputation as an effective, results-driven legislator willing to reach across the aisle to get things done. She has worked to expand educational opportunities to prepare students for the future while fighting for stronger federal funding for schools. She knows our success as a state and a nation depends on making sure everyone has quality education that is accessible for every single child. It is my honor to introduce our U.S. Senator, Amy Klobuchar.
Welcome to Minnesota. Is it cold enough for you? I hope so. It is really great. Thank you for that kind introduction, Amy. And I have many friends here. Steve Simon is here, who's our Secretary of State, does an incredible job. We also, I want to congratulate the award recipients, Isabella Hansen, for your commitment to service. Anna Edlin, thank you for what you do to inspire our services students. Dr. Andrew Furco, thank you for your work. And you guys have been doing this, I know, way before many of you were born 40 years ago, and your educators have been carrying this on in such a major way. And I think it couldn't be more important, this idea of service and volunteering and thinking about what you're doing in terms of small things can change the world, as a book I was just given says, than right now, where we are finally starting to emerge from this pandemic, where our mayor in Duluth says you can finally see the lighthouse on the horizon, where we have 300 million plus people, including so many of our young people who've been basically siloed off and are now coming together again. And it isn't easy, right, to see people again, that some of them you do want to see, some of you don't want to see. And so what happens is that you start thinking, what is this new world like that I'm going to be in? And one of the ways you can bridge some of those issues is by volunteering, by serving, by helping, by thinking about that as the purpose of your life. I think about my own life. I heard there's some Campfire members here, right? There we are. I was in Campfire. Back then it was called Campfire Girls. My mom was a leader. All of the girls would come over to our house, to our basement. And my mom, who taught second grade until she was 70 years old, was really focused on service. And so we would do things like go and volunteer at, back then we called them nursing homes, now assisted livings. We would plant flower bulbs in places that didn't have a lot of flowers. We would do a lot on conservation, and that was when I was like in second grade, third grade, and it really got in my head. So then, when that gets in your head, by the time I get to high school, in the middle of babysitting and working as a waitress at Baker Square Pie, where I wasn't very good, I once spilled 4 iced teas on one customer. That's when I decided I should be a senator. But I start volunteering by running for like student council in high school. And back then, a girl was hardly ever the president. Our highest thing we could attain was secretary treasurer. Not true in every school, but sort of true in mine. And that's what I did. I raised money for the prom by selling Lifesaver lollipops, big excitement. And then I started doing summer jobs. I mean, I remember I worked at the public defender's office one summer while I was working at A&W as a car hop, which is a whole different thing, to make some money. And I got to see another part of the world by doing those volunteer jobs. I then go off to college, continue doing some volunteering there, especially political volunteering. I then go to law school, and I come back to the Twin Cities, brand new. I got a job at the law firm, I got a bunch of student loans, and I decide, well, I'm gonna do more than just work at the law firm. And that's when I got involved in something called Amicus, where you visit people in prison. And I'm here, this young lawyer, and I start visiting this woman who had actually killed a pimp and got convicted of murder one, which is a whole nother story, and was in prison for a significant amount of time. And it was this moment in time where we were trying to do some innovative things in prison, and they actually would let me drive her along with some other inmates, this is a true story, in my Honda Civic, to plays and to her house for her birthday party. This is a true story. I think there was someone else from the prison that was in another car, but that's what we do to get people used to being out in the community. I then got elected, though years go by, like 10 years go by. She and I, by the way, are still in touch. She sends me cards, she got married, she got out, she got married. But then I got elected prosecutor. Okay, I still remember going to the prison and she said, "This isn't cool for me to have you here right now." Because like you put it, and I said, I get it. And so then we just started corresponding. So that was that volunteer experience. I then went on, as I said, ran for office, ran for US Senate, and I went from there. And when I think about, was on the boards, by the way, through the years of PACER, which is a group that of kids with disabilities, big brothers, big sisters. So I've done both the frontline volunteering and worked on the boards. And it has changed my life because it's allowed me to be better at my job. And it doesn't matter if you're in the private sector or the public sector, it allows you to be better at your job if you understand another slice of life that you wouldn't understand if you're just thinking about yourself and your own family. And it's literally made me better as a legislator. My dad actually came out of not much. He worked, he was up in the northern Minnesota. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines. He never graduated even from high school. And he ended up sending my dad to a 2-year community college, which is near and dear to my heart. And from there, my dad got a 4-year degree right here at the University of Minnesota, and went on to serve in the Army and then be an award-winning journalist. And it was a little bit like my life because his time in the Army was his volunteering, right? And then he went on to tell the stories of what he called ordinary people doing extraordinary things, everyday people for the Star Tribune. He had a big column that he wrote all the time, and he got to cover the Vikings, a whole nother story. He once wrote a book that is still sadly relevant today called Will the Vikings Ever Win the Super Bowl? Because they never have. So that's my parents with my mom's teaching and my dad's decision to go into journalism and report on regular people and their stories, and he actually took on big interest by doing that because he would tell their stories and he did it with some humor, like about a bank ripping someone off or about this happening or that happening, and then he'd get something done for them. So he did it in a very different way than me, his service, but it was still service. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about is where we are now. As you look at what you're doing, I've told you my story so you can understand. I get what you're doing, and I can tell you if we weren't doing it right now, we would be a void right now in our country if we didn't have people looking out for other people, because we are living at some really difficult times. And so one of my messages to you here is to engage and keep doing this service, but also keep listening to other people, especially the students out there, listening to other viewpoints, even when someone is, you don't agree with them, be willing to talk to them about stuff. Because we are getting so polarized and so disengaged that one way I see we can find that common purpose, right, is by engaging again. And I thought about that and have been thinking about that in a big way with what's happening to the people of Ukraine, and the fact that this is coinciding with Americans getting out and talking to each other again, and that there's a unified purpose in terms of standing on their side. There is much less isolationism than we've seen in the past, where people realize we have to stand with them. There is openness to refugees. I'm working right now on the Afghan refugees, honestly, because I don't want them to be left behind and forgotten behind. I hope this is going to make us more open to immigration reform and those kinds of things as we look at the world around us and talk to people about it. I saw it with Judge Jackson's hearing. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and my favorite moment was when she was finally out in the sun, our next Supreme Court Justice, under that beautiful blue sky, and I thought she is finally out of that deep, dark cave called the Senate Judiciary Committee, and she is out there getting the love and the warmth that she needs for her fine career. But what I saw is that the people in the country didn't really agree with what was going on in the Judiciary Committee. Even if maybe they were from different politics, it showed that they thought you got to treat her with more dignity. And that she deserved to have her spot on the Supreme Court with her experience. Again, I thought that was interesting because, again, people are talking to each other at work and it's a check on things. So that is my ask of you. I have to work with people of wildly different political beliefs. I serve on 3 committees with Ted Cruz, okay? So just so you think I'm not being honest here about my situation. And so I've got to work with people all the time and try to find some way to talk to them. And why do I do it? Well, one, I like to get things done. And I just got a whole bunch of bills done this last week, including a big bill on shipping that needed help with the supply chain, including getting something done when it comes to the fact that we have 200 statues in the U.S. Capitol and only 14 are women. So I passed a bill with Susan Collins that we finally have statues for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor. So I've been working on these things kind of a step at a time, just like you guys do, right? We have the same thing happen in the Senate. You can go give speeches by yourself all the time and yell about people in an empty chamber and get on TV. That's good, I do that sometimes. Or you can choose to stand next to someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. And my big moment, aha moment of that was actually, you're not gonna believe this, January 6th. I was in charge of the Electoral College counting of those ballots along with Senator Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, who's a very good friend of mine. And it was our job to make sure that we counted those ballots by the end of the day. No one ever expected that we would have insurrectionists invade the Capitol and, you know, go after officers with several officers dying, come in with bear spray and come in with poles and come in with horrible, horrible words used at our officers. One officer was called the N-word 15 times, officer died. And at the end, he collapsed in the rotunda and he looked at his friend and he said, "Is this America?" So it was our job to make sure that the insurrectionists didn't take over. Mine and Roy Blunt are Republican. And when they took us away to this undisclosed location, I stood on the stage because Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell had been brought to another place. And I said, there's one thing that's gonna happen here, and that is that we are gonna get our jobs done. We're gonna go back in that chamber tonight, no matter how late it is, no matter when it is, because our democracy in the end must win. And so we sat there in that room all day and came back at about, 10 or 11 at night. And then at 4 in the morning, after we'd had the final votes on the last states, and these young women had the presence of mind to save the mahogany boxes that contain all the electoral ballots, because for certain they would have been burned or stolen. At 4 in the morning, it was me, Republican Roy Blunt, and Vice President Pence. It was just the 3 of us who took that walk where in the morning we had walked joyously over to the house. It's this big ceremony that happens alone, with the 2 women holding the mahogany box with the last of the electoral ballots up through Wyoming. And we walked through broken glass, spray painted columns, and got to the House of Representatives where they were waiting, and we did our job. And it was Vice President Pence, who had been defeated in the election, who did his job and declared that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had won the election. And then 2 weeks later, we stood on the stage of the platform where the insurrectionists had first evaded. And when you watch that on TV, what you didn't realize is that there was still spray paint on the columns outside. They were we had to paint them with white paint because we couldn't get it off. The windows behind us weren't real. They were all makeshift windows because they had chosen that location to come in. And we stood there with President Bush, with President Obama, with the leadership of both parties, and said, this is how our democracy works. And I got to meet Lady Gaga. But as I said that day from the stage, that beautiful blue sky, I said, and I remember thinking, I looked up as Garth Brooks was singing Amazing Grace, I thought, No, with the name of the senator in my head, no drones are coming down to kill us, because everyone wanted to go inside. And President Biden and those of us that planned this said emphatically, we're taking back that platform. We're not going inside. We're going to trust our security people and military. We know it failed at the insurrection, but this is a different planning process. This is a different group. And we took back that platform. And as I said that day, this is a moment where our country picks itself up, brushes itself off, and moves forward as we always do. One nation under God, with indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That is what our country is about. So when I ask you to keep up this service, not only because you get to know people and you help people and you know every little thing makes a difference, I'm asking you to do it too for our entire country and our democracy. Because this purpose of helping other people and maybe then meeting people that you wouldn't normally get to know or don't agree with on some things, but find common ground on your purpose, or as you go through life, trying to be willing to listen to other viewpoints and kindly explain your viewpoint and why it might be different than theirs. That's what democracy is about. And let's never forget it. So I hope you see as we go through this beautiful conference and the day that what you're doing is, in the words of my friend John McCain, last words he said to me when he was dying, and I went to visit him in Sedona, he pointed to a line in a book, and it was this, one of his books, because he couldn't speak anymore. And it said, there's nothing more liberating in life than fighting for a cause larger than yourself. That's what you're doing. Thank you.